Ali Sethi, I can't tell you how happy I am to have you here at the BBC. How are you?
I'm very happy too.
You know, I am a big fan of your music and of your singing. And I discovered your music firstly through Coke Studio. And then I just went into this YouTube rabbit hole of discovering more and more Ali Sethi songs. How many people do you find still discovering your music for the first time? And do you ever get over that sensation of meeting people who've just found out who you are?
No, it keeps happening. And actually, it's a very thrilling experience because I think there's a novelty to it. When people have just heard my music for the first time, the response I often get is, I can't believe you exist in this era, which I like. I like that very much. It makes me feel validated.
Well, the reason why people can't believe that you exist in this era is because you are the modern king of ghazal. And yeah, I mean, look, you've said that this is not a title that you grew up wanting to claim, but now that you have it, you're owning it, right?
I mean, I'm trying to continue to sing ghazal because I love ghazal music. And yeah, I think I'm probably one of the few, if not the only one, sort of performers, younger performers from South Asia today who kind of are really into the ghazal as a form, as a way of communicating with people through music. So,
you know, it's really interesting for a number of reasons, because when I first listened to your music, I couldn't identify it as ghazal, and it's only when I then kind of discovered more about it and then tried to research a little about what it was based on, and sometimes it was more evident where you knew it was like a Mehdi Hassan cover or whatever it might have been, or it was certain prose written by Faiz Ahmed Faiz, or, you know, you can kind of work it out that way. But you've kind of built a niche for yourself in this genre. Like you said, probably the only person doing it right now. How did that happen?
I grew up listening to a lot of traditional Pakistani and Indian classical music, folk music. My mother would only play traditional music in the house. So we grew up listening to a lot of qawwali, to a lot of ghazal as well, to great ghazal singers like Mehdi Hassan, Farida Khanum, Iqbal Bano, Noor Jahan, etc. And my mom, I think I had a singing voice when I was a very little kid. And my mother would make me sing these things, these very complex songs that I had no right to sing, you know, but she would really not just indulge me or encourage me. She kind of activated me when I was a kid, you know. She would pay attention to me when I sang, you know, and then she would kind of, in a real way, pay attention to it and be like, yes, wah, that was a good one, you know, like, do you want to try that? Do you want to try that phrase? And when there would be guests in our home, my mother would often summon me and say, can you please sing that Faiz thing you were singing yesterday? And I would very seriously, like a studious little brat, I would stand there and like hands behind, you know, in this kind of teacher's pet way, just kind of like, you know, perform the ghazal. And as I entered into my teens, I found that the ghazal form, as the poetry of the ghazal, is very versatile. It accommodates a lot of different perspectives. You know, there's obviously romance and sensuous elements, but there's also social, historical perspectives, critiques of society, of zamana. You know, zamana is the great enemy in the ghazal. It's the great, like, persecutor.
Zamana being the era, right?
Zamana being the era, your time. So you are kind of, you know, not, the time is out of joint with who you are, or you're out of joint. But zamana also being society. So it's in some ways a kind of non-conformist genre. You know, it kind of exults in being marginal to whatever the mainstream wants at that very moment.
When one thinks of ghazal, it's not considered to be, or certainly I don't think that the older generation who grew up listening to ghazal saw it as a social political critique of their zamana. I think you've managed to phrase it and word it and sell it in a certain way that allows people to delve into it and kind of deconstruct the lyrics that one is singing about. Have you discovered that yourself while learning about ghazal?
It's a beautiful question. Thank you for asking it. Yes, absolutely. So I went away to college. I went to Harvard. But what I ended up studying was the history and literature of pre-colonial South Asia. And what I found there was this treasure chest of, poetic genres, ideas, musical cultures, subcultures, very interesting stuff that today makes complete sense in today's era of identity politics. When I hear woke brown kids, on social media talking about sort of gender bending, multicultural, sort of happily hybrid perspectives, bringing people together, non-binary, ideas of love, etc. It fits because those are the people who made the ghazal. Those are the kinds of poets. They were migrants. They were often people who were trying to reconcile different folk traditions. They were taking from women's folk music. They were taking from women's shadi songs. They were taking from the protest songs of caste communities. And they were kind of merging. Someone like Amir Khusro, who's supposed to have brought the ghazal genre to South Asia, is credited with doing a lot of this stuff. They were polymaths. They were polyglots, and I feel like in my Pakistan, the Pakistan I grew up in, which is General Ziaul Haq's Pakistan and onwards, there's been this insistence on a monolithic, narrow idea of Pakistani identity, which has been, we have to purge ourselves of all these other influences. Today we see it happening in India as well, this kind of purging of the other. And actually, the ghazal is the perfect vehicle or technology, if you will, through which we can make these connections.
Has it been a struggle convincing other people that the genre is so diverse and that the genre offers them so much room for exploration?
Yes, it's been a bit of a struggle because I remember when I started singing ghazal, started uploading ghazals to SoundCloud about 5 years ago, when nobody knew that I was a musician. A lot of young people just responded to it and said, we love this, without really, I didn't hashtag it as a ghazal. I said, this is a song, It was a cover of the ghazal, Mohabbat Karne Wale Kam Na Honge. A lot of young people loved it because the arrangement felt very contemporary. There was a sort of acoustic guitar playing and there were these very contemporary poppy kind of synths playing and things. But I remember a producer, a well-known producer, reached out to me and said, I love the singing, I love the musicality, but why do you want to sing the ghazal? It's such a auntie uncle, genre. Like, why do you want to? And at the time I said, how much time do you have? I want to tell you about the ghazal. Historically, the ghazal has been a young person's genre. It's the most romantic, the most potent, the most critical of society. All the things young people do. I mean, it's grunge, really.
So was it about the musical arrangement and the way you presented it? I mean, like you said, you put it up in a contemporary fashion with an acoustic guitar. Maybe the reason why I love Ranjish He Sethi so much is because the arrangement is so modern. It's not a classical arrangement on there. So is it all about how you kind of gift wrap this to the audience?
You can put it like that, Haroon, but I also think that that's also what's always been done with ghazals. I mean, our generation grew up with this idea that our parents and grandparents are listening to ghazals, right? And we think tabla and harmonium are the instruments for the ghazal. Actually, the harmonium is a European instrument that only arrived in the subcontinent 100 years ago via missionaries and was adopted by courtesans and roaming minstrels because it was easy to carry.
Wow, I did not know that.
We think of it as the quintessential Desi instrument. Yeah. Actually, it's like a German or French instrument.
Wow.
You think of the tanpura as this Indian instrument.
Yeah.
The word is tambura, same root as tambourine. Same root as tambur in Turkish. It also traveled, some original version of it traveled from Central Asia and was adapted and absorbed. So what we think of as traditional was also once experimental.
But there are traditionalists who would argue that you're diluting the genre.
Well, they can go back and listen to all the lovely audio cassettes that they have. They can pull them out of their drawers and make their old tape recorders and their vinyl. Somebody reached out to me and said, do you think I could find some nice vinyls of Mehdi Hasan Saab and Farida Khanum? And I was like, absolutely. I'm looking for the same.
So, have you, like I said, there are traditionalists who might think that way, but also your own family. I mean, your mum who raised you reciting ghazals in its most traditional form. Was there ever a conversation with your own family about how you were taking the genre forward?
Yeah, my mom is not a fan of my music. I don't think she is. She's like, kuch acha suna do, repeatedly. And I hate it when she's present at my concerts because she gets music and I know that it's not up to the mark for her. My father, on the other hand, knows nothing about music. So when it's like, Tamadam Maskarandar, he's like, now I get it. He starts bobbing his head. He's like, ye hui na baat. Like, now this is...
But that's what I mean. You're you're walking this very fine line between traditionalists and popularists, and you are creating a niche for yourself or creating a new market for yourself. But I'm guessing you're fighting against the grain in a lot of ways.
Which can be fun. I don't mind it. I mean, this is who I am. I'm somebody who loves ghazal, who has dwelled inside the ghazal and other classical forms of music like qawwali, like khayal, like thumri. And I'm also somebody who's grown up listening to a lot of Western pop music, who listens to a lot of contemporary R&B sort of, beats. And I'm always looking for reconciliations. I'm always looking to bring things that appear to be opposites of one another or estranged from one another together in a place where they can...
But it must come with its set of challenges, right? Because, let's break it down in the most basic form. Being an artist or being a singer in any music industry is about your commercial viability as well. How much your records can sell. If a record label is going to sign you up, then they need to know there's an audience for your music. Firstly, we know the record label culture doesn't really exist in Pakistan right now. And secondly, we know that every... commercial corporation wants a young face appealing to a young demographic. And are they convinced that you can do that?
Well, so it's interesting. Coke Studio, which a lot of people watch, which seems to be the most prominent platform from Pakistan, showcasing Pakistani music. After Ranjishi Sahi, which I remember was a little bit of a risk. I remember the producers being like, do we want to do a ghazal? And I said, I would love to do a ghazal. And all credit to Bilal Maqsood and Faisal Kapadia of Strings, who said, okay, then let's do Ranjishi Sahi, which was a big challenge for me, but which was in some ways a very bold step for them. I don't think a ghazal had been done on Cook Studio until then. But the response they got was extraordinary, and it was overwhelmingly from younger people saying, we love this because we connect with the poetry, we connect with the feeling of like wanting to be with someone and not being... I mean, it's like what every other Adele song is about as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think it's just this image, the ghazal has an image problem, let's put it that way. Right,
so
and I think it's being lifted out of that image problem into. I mean, you and I follow each other on Instagram. Every day I have kids with guitars, gals with keyboards sitting in Hyderabad, in Lucknow, in Brampton, Toronto, in Brooklyn, in Birmingham, uploading videos, clips of themselves singing these ghazals and doing very interesting variations, riffs, like these quirky vocal sort of like departures from the way I've done it. And I think to myself, this is a movement. This is not just an aesthetic situation. This is like people being like, yeah, I'm going to pour myself into this thing because I connect with it. I think that's really special.
I love the fact that you just compared ghazal to Adele's music, because you know what? It's a really good comparison.
Right?
For me, I don't necessarily...
You can pitch my record as that, Haroon.
I love
Would
that.
you like to produce my next record?
I would love to. So I love the fact that you made that comparison, for the simple fact that I don't necessarily understand every word that you're saying in those ghazals, but your tone and your delivery and the pain sometimes that comes through in your voice, I'm not sure where that pain is stemming from, but it really connects with the person listening to it. So I feel the emotions you're going through in Ranjishi Sahi, or in Gulo Merang, or in Chandni Raat, or even in Chankita as well, which I love. I feel the emotions even if I don't necessarily understand the words. And that comes through, that's because of the way you express yourself.
Well, thank you.
So how much work goes into actually making sure you emote the right emotions to complement the words that you're singing?
So, it's interesting you asked that. You're great, Haroon. You're like an amazing, amazing musical interviewer. Is that a compliment? I don't know. I'm sorry if it's not.
That's okay.
I've never fielded these such brilliant questions. These are questions that I ask myself a lot. I think I'm a more musical person than I'm musical first and lyrical later. The music comes to me, speaks to me first. I've also spent now a considerable amount of time, some 15 years inside these apprenticeships with two very, very wonderful Pakistani musicians. Ustad Nasiruddin Sami, who's my Ustad, and Farida Khanum Saiba, who's a great ghazal legend, as you know. And in fact, just now before coming to London 4 days ago, I was sitting with Farida ji. We were doing a ghazal practice for like 4 hours, and she was saying, you're not doing it properly. There's one phrase and I have an iPhone recording that I was listening to on my way here, and it was about the emotion. And she was saying, forget about the words for a second. See how the melody is emoting. Melody also is an emotional thing. It's an emoting entity. Feel the personality of the melody. Like, where does it become tense? Where does it let loose? Where is there an ebb and flow? Think of a boat in water. Like, we were having this beautiful conversation about how to sing a ghazal. And now when I go back to Lahore, I'm doing a session with my Ustad Nasiruddin Sami Sahab at a university in Lahore, which is about rag, which is the melodic sort of framework that I use to make tunes and compositions for the ghazal renditions that I do. So the music comes to me first, and I more and more am able to sense the personalities of these rags. They're like living, breathing entities. I think that's what I'm channeling. What you experience maybe as the emotive quality is actually for me the raga-ness, or like the rag ras or the rag essence that I'm trying to channel. Where is it plaintive? Where is the yearning? What is the melodic phrase? Like in Chand Kitna, we were singing yesterday at the Maidaville Studios, and there was I did this variation on it, where normally I do Chand Kitna gulane hai raat ve meda Jit Lila Deva. Right, and so I went and stayed that note. Jit Lila Deva, Dalila Deva. Now these are things that you hear, that's a note. I can see the note. Sa ni da pa ma, ni da pa ma ga. It's something that I've studied with my teacher, is that you build that melodic tension and then you resolve it via that beautiful descent, which has to be kind of gentle and soft, and you can't be tense or stressed there. So I'm thinking of it often like that. And if people experience it as a kind of emotive quality, well, then it's a win-win situation.
So that's really interesting that you've just said that, because the way you've described it is that invisibly you can see the musicality kind of playing out in front of you. Yeah. You can see the notes kind of playing out in front of you.
Which can be a hindrance sometimes also.
Really?
Yeah, because it's like I can't get rid of that map that's always in my head. It's like a kind of Google Music map that I can see.
I've never heard it described like that, so I'm quite fascinated.
I envy musicians actually who just appear to just emote. I'm just like, I wish I had that.
Well, the reason why I actually thought your answer was going to be a little bit different is because you've described yourself as somebody who was an art student throughout your teenage years. And here you found an outlet to express that art through. It is so I almost think when you go off in your songs and you do various rags and however you choose to express yourself, I thought that was a way for you to being able to express your art. Would that be unfair to say?
No, I'm sure that's also a part of it. And I think many kind of levels of angst also come through, I think it's the angst of growing up in where I did grow up, the kind of circumstances that I grew up in. But what's really beautiful and special for me is that people who appear to have nothing in common with me will often send me messages and say, I get it. I feel you. I connect with that thing.
So when you said that the circumstances you grew up in, is that the fact that art was not seen to be... I don't know if respected is the right word, but art was not seen to be a kind of viable career form in Pakistan in the 90s, was it?
Yeah, that's part of it also. I think at the very basic level, it was just that I was drawn to these obscure, outdated forms of poetry and music. That there was nobody was paying attention to them, you weren't allowed to really bring a kind of critical appreciation to these things. These things were for, for drunk uncles, or for that the weeping aunties at they were like relegated to this
Ali, there must have been people who made you feel uncool during your...
there you go. I think that's what I'm trying to say. I distinctly remember, I was 11 years old and there was a car full of boys and we were, driving off and somebody was trying out their first cigarette or whatever. And I thought, okay, I'm going to just play my audio cassette, ghazal audio cassette. And they started laughing at me and they wouldn't stop laughing. And then they laughed at me for days on end. And I was like, okay, this is just for me. This is not for anybody else. And now those same dudes, now they're like, hey, can you sing those ghazals at my wedding? And I'm like, I don't think so. Not unless you pay top dollar.
So that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, like you said, you know, there was that element of being made to feel uncool when you were growing up for liking a form of music
Absolutely.
that wasn't seen to be mainstream at that time.
Not only not seen to be mainstream, but not seen to be muscular enough, not seen to be, you know, Western enough, not seen to be exportable enough. All those complexes that one grows up with in a post-colonial society, really.
So when you're at this place now in 2020, where your music is doing extremely well, where people are inviting you all around the world to perform at great events and great platforms, do you feel a sense of fulfillment that you've managed to literally redefine this genre of music to an entire generation?
I don't allow myself to feel anything like that. I think I was just saying to somebody yesterday that I always was, and I think I always will be, a student of music. I go to it because it's like a safe space. I feel like when I go to it, I feel sukoon, I feel calm, I feel restored, whole, connected to something that is accommodating of multiplicity. And I think that's my, for as long as I have that feeling, I feel alive and well.
But you know, the way you choose to present yourself, is that part of making the music more appealing? Because you are a personality in the way you dress, in the way you look, you know. I mean, let's take the jacket you're wearing right now, you know, for example, or what you wore yesterday to Maida Vale, or your concert the day before that.
You know what it is? I think it's also this delayed effervescence. I think because I was kind of overweight and chunky and awkward as a teenager throughout those years, I didn't get my chance to wear that blingy stuff, which I always loved, and kind of but also because, you know, I'm an art student and I'm an art aficionado, and I love this idea that the ghazal is this ornamented, highly ornamented, you know, decadent also in some ways genre of poetry. You know, you can like load on the just like keep adding complicated metaphors and like, you know, like making it more and more languid and pained and florid, and, you know, add more print, more pattern, more sparkle to the thing. So I think sometimes I dress that way because it allows me to get away from this dichotomy between traditional and modern, between Eastern and Western, between, you know, Indian or Pakistani. Like I feel like sometimes that just the flash of color or something allows me to exit. Because what else would I wear as a ghazal singer? If I wore a tuxedo, which I wore during the Ranjishi Sahi performance, you know, I mean, I thought at that time it was a good idea, but now in retrospect, it is a bit typical. Because what I'm saying is, okay, I'm taking the ghazal into this kind of, you know,
Western,
into the bow tie zone.
Yeah.
Like I'm saying the ghazal is like a kind of formal music.
Yeah.
It's not what I believe. When I wear this like grandma Razai quilt print, and like wear my Chitrali hat and wear my, you know.
But people think you're making a fashion statement right now.
But this is what I'm saying. I'm not. These are the constituent parts of who I am. I'm made up of all these things.
Do you think being a performer allows you to be who you are?
Yes.
Is it almost like a guise that you can hide behind?
Yes. Isn't that interesting?
It's really interesting because I guess if you were a normal person with a normal job that wasn't in the performing arts space.
Yeah, I would not get away with this. No.
Exactly.
You're absolutely right.
Why do you think that is?
Haroon, this interview can go on forever. I think that you're just like being my therapist now. You've answered it. It's because, you know, we all have, you know, fantasies.
Is it societal, almost societal constraints?
No, I don't think it's societal constraints in this case. I think if you feel entitled to your aesthetic, which I don't think everybody does. When I see people with tattoos, I feel a twinge of admiration. I think, you know, I'm not brave enough to have a tattoo because I couldn't live with the permanence of it. I'm such a shape-shifting sort of person, you know, constantly exploring and moving around. When I see somebody with like a nose ring or with an ear pierced, I again feel this kind of surge of respect almost. You know, it's like, yeah, I want that, but would I live with it? No, I don't think I could live with it, you know, like all the time. This kind of thing, like being able to wear something and then take it off and then wear something else and take it off.
Do you not think that that's because there is a pressure in South Asian communities to conform to the norm?
Absolutely, of course.
You know, if you were to get your ear pierced or if you were to get a nose ring or whatever it might be, there is this idea that you're breaking free from the norm, and there's this idea that you're either rebelling or you're trying to make a statement. And people are scared of the repercussions of making a statement.
Absolutely.
So, but
then I hide behind like iconic poems, right? So like I quote Bulle Shah saying Kanjari baniya meri izzat na ghatdi mainu nach ke yaar manavan de. Bulle Shah, who's like is revered by the grandparents generation, by the people who impose these restrictions and like say beta ye kapde mat pehno, beta ghar se bahar mat jao, beta lower your voice, beta don't, they say, oh yeah, Bulle Shah, he's great, right? Because he's dead, like he's been gone for 300 years. I mean, if they were confronted with Bulle Shah, they'd be like, keep him out of our gates, of our doors. What did Bulle Shah do? He was a Sayyid, he was an upper caste guy, and he famously, according to virtually all of his biographies, he decided one day to put on a dancing girl's anklets and dressed like a dancing woman and did this dance in the public bazaar, in the public square, to convince his spiritual master that he was genuinely devoted to the cause.
One thing that disappoints me a little bit is the fact that when I look at the Pakistani music landscape right now, apart from your well, I want to call them legends, but apart from the last generation of artists who have now established themselves, had their careers and are taking a little bit of a backseat, I only really see you and Asim Azhar as male singers who are waving that new wave of music kind of flag. And I know there is an underground...
More. What do you mean by new wave of music?
So what I mean is that sitting here in the UK, if I look at the singers who have cut through and have managed to make a mark amongst maybe diaspora audiences living here, they know who you are and they know who Asim Azhar is, and I'm not sure they know many more people than that. They might know Umair or Uzair Jaswal, but I don't think they know many more than that. And I think they still listen to the music through Coke Studio or other avenues, but you two have quite well established yourselves as brands in the music industry. What do you think of the current state of the music industry? Do you see that from my perspective?
It's a very large question. It's an interesting question, but I think there's a lot to say here. I mean, first of all, I think Asim Azhar is brilliant. I just want to say that I think he's brilliant. And he's just done a brilliant new track with Cruella. Have you heard this?
I haven't heard it yet.
It's so great. And he's also somebody who aesthetically, visually, he pushes the envelope, like he's someone. I sent him this WhatsApp message the other day being like, just keep doing what you do, Asim. I think he's great. Yeah, I think, I think we should separate.
You can disagree with me, by the way.
No, I partly agree with what you're saying. I mean, I get the drift. There's people like Talal Qureshi, who does electronic music. There's people like Adil Umar. There's people like Poor Rich Boy in Lahore. There's Natasha Ijaz. There's... even, Momina Mustahsan.
Yeah, I mentioned male pop stars, but Momina, Aima, there are Kurtalem Baloch, who I think is fantastic.
Right.
Even she has been around for over 10 years, to be honest.
Right.
But I'm talking about to be honest, Asim has also been around.
What do you think about Bilal Saeed? I think his music is really
great, but for us in the British Asian scene, he's been around for a while.
Okay.
What I mean is, right now, when I look around and see who's broken through in the last 5 years, who I think, has really emerged as an international face for Pakistani music, I could name you 4 or 5 people, and not many more than that. And 4 or 5 people is not a promising sign of an entire generation for music industry.
Right, well, there you go. Well, then there's only one Coke studio, right? Are there any record labels in Pakistan right now that are promoting young talent? I don't think so. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. There are 80 plus TV channels in Pakistan and not one channel devoted to creating original musical content. PTV and Radio Pakistan were the great nurseries for music, right? The great Pakistani singers and instrumental musicians, the tabla nawazes, the sarangi players, the sitar players, and the pop acts, they emerged out of these state-funded institutions. Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, spent a lot of time recording, honing his craft, meeting other musicians. Farida Khanam ji says this to me a lot. She says, "Beta, mahal ko wapas leke aao, mahal." And for the longest time, I thought mahal is this fuddy-duddy word, which means, we've lost that pristine, impossible to recreate environment. By mahal, I now believe she means community. She believes communities of artists, communities of art, communities of thought, communities of feeling even, She describes to me, it's like mouth-watering for me. She's like, yeah, I used to wake up, wake late after a performance at night, I'd just drive my car over to the radio station, 4 in the afternoon. I'd walk in and Faiz Saab would be sitting there saying, I've written a new poem, do you want to try it out? And there would be Nathu Khan Saab on his sarangi saying, Is raag mein try karke dekho. And Shaukat Saab would come on his tabla and say, I want to play this. And then we'd see Nusrat Saab in the corner, like sort of revising some qawwali in one room, and Mehdi Saab would be sitting there and saying, let's go get some sandwiches from
This
the canteen.
can't be real.
This is real.
Wow.
I have photographs in my, and I'm not just being nostalgic here, because nostalgia has the superficial way of approaching it. I'm saying these are all people who have made the map of South Asian music and put it on the world map, right? What are we missing? We're missing that ability to congregate freely and to exchange ideas and to be stimulated, inspired, and kind of honed by one another.
Ali, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Haroon. You're the best.
If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe and click the bell icon to keep up to date. For more great audio and video from the BBC, listen on Sounds or watch on iPlayer.